All right, everyone. Welcome to our pre-Den of Wolves Q&A. I've got a bit of information we're going to go over, and then I have a couple announcements at the end, and we'll have time for questions at the end as well. We have a couple people who submitted questions ahead of time, which I've already got answers for. But if you do have a question while we're talking, if you'll just put it in the chat channel, we will try to make time either during or after to answer everyone's question. So there is a couple of new players in here, which I'm very excited about. I want to let everyone know who hasn't played with us yet. We are planning our typical doors opening at 8. We will be at the Plano American Legion post like before. Doors will open at 8, and our game will actually start about 9 o'clock. And there is a pub on site, and it opens around noon. For this game, we are going to try and not stop the game for lunch. We always kind of play this by ear. If there's someone who's playing who has a medical need, or if control feels like it's in the best service of the game to stop, we will. But we're going to make every attempt not to actually stop for lunch. We'll just have a round in the middle of the game that will be longer than a typical round, and that will allow people to kind of eat food they have on premises. So we suggest that you bring food or you order food in. We'll be in Plano. There's a ton of food everywhere near the venue. Or like I said, the pub opens at noon. They've got some bar food there. It's something. Role emails have already been sent out. Everyone should have their roles, unless you're on the Vulcan. I don't know if the Vulcan's gone out yet or not. So if you have not received your role sheets or your team briefings and you're looking for those, please say something in the chat channel now. So for anyone who is new, on game day, when you arrive at the venue, sometime between 8 and 9, DMG will already be there, Control will already be there. We'll show you, where your team is, where you're sitting. But once you've arrived and you found your spot, we strongly, strongly encourage you to look through all of your components at your table, match them to your team briefing, make sure you're not missing any resources, or if you have any questions, we'll be walking around. I see the Thomas says, read your cards, and he's reading my mind. My very next sentence says, read through your team's special action cards. Some teams have one or two of these cards, and they radically change the game. So you should read through your special action cards. Other teams will have dozens of them. So you need to read through them. Even if you're not planning on carrying them around during the day, if you're gonna give that job to someone else on your team, you should at least have an idea of what your team is able to do. So we strongly suggest you familiarize yourself with all the components at your desk. Matt just asked if we can see these beforehand. Unfortunately not, Matt. A lot of the components, some spaceships will start with like water or food or fuel, and they're just minis. A lot of the resources are actually listed on your handout that's been emailed to you, so you'll know what you're starting with. And then as far as the cards go, I don't have a convenient way to email a digital deck of cards. That's something I could look into in the future. But these cards sometimes get tweaked slightly from game to game. So we don't currently have any plan to show them beforehand. It's not a lot of information. Like I said, it might be a card or two. But it's terrible to know that you had a resource at your disposal that could have helped you out in a situation, and you didn't even know that you had that card because you didn't get a chance to, or you didn't make time to look at them. So the special action cards will be like readily available, and yeah, exactly. Binary says that this has never happened to me, and it did happen to him. So read through your special action cards. Where was I? So even if you don't plan on playing a certain role on your team, we do recommend that you have an idea of what everyone on your team is doing. in Den of Wolves, there are a few people in the room that are not working in your interest. And so if you have a general idea of what your teammates are supposed to be doing, you might have a better, you might be better equipped to identify a wolf in the room. And then once you are comfortable with your team's components, we encourage you to get up and browse the room, meet with the other teams. You can look through anyone's components before the game that's sitting on the tables. We ask you not to remove anything from the tables before we start the game. And we'll go over all this on game day. We teach the entire game there on premises before we start. Just catching up on chat real quick. Lee, you wanna handle the chat room, and I'll keep going through my spiel.
Yep.
Okay. So the final thing I really have to say for our new players is your best friend's game day. We'll have some identification on some badges that will identify some of our more veteran players. So you can go and ask them questions, or you can find a member of control and ask them questions. Or once the game starts, your best friend is probably going to be our all-star media team. And we'll go over all that on game day. And then the final thing I have for all players before I specifically talk about our return players is this is the first game we're going to have a photo contest. We've got all sorts of swag, and so we're going to encourage everyone to take pictures during the day, post them to Discord, and then as control, we'll take probably about a few days to a week to take a look at the pictures and vote on who we think had the best picture, and we'll reach out to you on Discord and get you mailed a prize. So we're looking forward to our photo contest. New players specifically, is there any glaring questions before I go on? That's good. All right. So specifically for our returning players, every single one of the team briefs has changed. So we recommend that you read your components just like everyone else. Look over them carefully. Sometimes if you've played the game 2 or 3 times, you might have a tendency not to read that because you already know what's on it. And that could end up slapping you in the face on game day. So we encourage you to look over your team briefings. The game has gone through a slight retheme. And this is actually going to be our first game starting a multi-game kind of story arc. So please read your team briefings. If you are new player, I'm bringing asked, how do we win? How do we win is a good question. We'll swing back to that at the end. If you're a returning player, you're going to notice some very significant changes to the Star Alpha and the Vulcan. The Star Alpha has a gun. We're excited that the Star Alpha will now have a gun. And if you want to know more about how their gun works, you should talk to that team. And the Vulcan has more structured use of their prison labor. So we've had some issues in the past of whose job it was to return the prison labor to the Vulcan, if it was Control's job or if it was the player's job. Prison labor is a reoccurring hotspot that comes up over and over and over and over. So we've kind of changed the structure of this and added some components to this. And that's why if you're on the Vulcan, you've yet to see your team brief. The other big change that we've made is our council players in this game will now have a document at the start of the game kind of outlining the colonists' historic laws. So they'll have a foundation of how things were working before the start of our game. So they'll be able to use that foundation to then kind of create their own laws or keep the laws that are in place solidified or whatever the council chooses to do with that. In the past, this has been open-ended and not given to all of our players, but only the president. And so I'm hoping this will give the council a firmer foundation and they'll be able to hit the ground running and provide our players with a good legal government structure. There have been significant changes to our wolves. I'm not going to tell anyone what those changes are. I will say in some ways, Control thinks they might be easier to find. But they're also going to be much more powerful and heavily rewarded if they're able to secretly find one another. So there's some significant changes to wolves. You guys should be on the lookout for suspected wolves. And I think we've gone over this before in some of our Q&As, but for any players who think they have solved part of the game and are looking to reenact fixes that have worked in previous games, you're going to find that a lot of those past solutions won't have the same effect in this game as they have in previous games. I'm specifically looking at anyone who's thinking about deconstructing the Star Alpha. I want to highlight our media team for this game. We have a full 5-man media team. Our media team is going to have laptops and a printer, and they'll be making announcements as our media team has in the past, but they might also be giving out printed news. They might also be tweeting or posting to Discord. Our media team actually has a Discord handle, so if there is information you want to get to the media team, but you can't happen to track one down, you could send them a message on Discord. I can't guarantee they're going to be looking at it. You'll need to confirm that with those players on game day, but I'm looking forward to our media team in this game. If you have any questions about media, let me know. And then finally, we do have a narrative ending, or a couple of potential narrative endings kind of planned out for this game. So we're hoping this will have a nice, clean narrative ending.
One thing I do want to say on that is we have somewhat changed the objectives for the wolves. The wolves are not necessarily going to be trying to destroy the fleet entirely. They have an alternate win condition that they will be given, but they're not necessarily going to be trying to just completely destroy the fleet. So that will change things a lot.
Correct. I have had a few people ask me if there are any openings in this game. So is there anyone in this channel who is missing a player? Because we have quite the wait list for this particular game. Okay, well, that's a good sign. It seems like it's going to be a full game. We have a very full control team. Last time I counted our control team, we were like 7 or 8 strong. So we will have a ton of control there on the day. We have a full roster of players. So I'm really looking forward to this run. We've made several minor tweaks to the game, and we're just excited to see how everything plays out. After this game in May, we're going to be bringing Den of Wolves back at BGGCon. So we're looking for lots of feedback from this game, because we always want to improve and bring a better game every single time, and we especially want our con games to be really great so we can bring new players into the hobby. After our con game in May, we're actually not running a game. We don't currently have a game on the books for June. What we are planning in June is a community day. And before the end of this announcement, I'll make a post in news and announcements. But community day will be at the Post in Plano. We're just encouraging everybody to come out. We'll have a bunch of our mega game components there. If you've never played a game, you could come out and see all of our different games and talk to us about them. And then we're asking everyone to bring their favorite board games. We'll sit around, we'll drink beer, we'll eat food, we'll play board games. We'll just spend the day together. I also have some door prizes for that event, and we're just looking to spend a day with the community, having fun and playing board games. And that is all I have for my points to go over. So I have a couple of questions already queued up. You guys have any questions? you can speak up or put them in the chat. Lee, did I miss any questions? Did somebody ask something?
No. No. Binary asks, do we know what percentage new players? No, I don't have that information at the moment.
God,
The
what are you even
number-
doing with your life, Lee?
The number of new players that I saw earlier was 9. I'm not the best math guy. I think this is a 55-player game.
Wow.
Is that right, Lee?
43.
43. So, and I think it was 9 out of 43.
That'll be really good.
Yeah, there you go. Three on one team right there. So that is what I thought I counted earlier. Don't hold me to it. Someone did ask earlier, they had a new player and they asked, how do I win? There are several ways to win Den of Wolves. There's not any one winner normally. If you play to your team briefing and you feel like you've achieved those goals, you have won. Everyone will have at least one individual briefing, and those are pretty black and white. If you've achieved that, you have won. If you've stopped the wolves from doing what they intended to do, you have won, unless you're a wolf. If you're a wolf, you'll be given your own very specific set of objectives, and if you've achieved those, you have won. Greg has kindly linked a Megagame article. Say it's titled "Beginner's Guide: Winning a Megagame." That's a great read. It is a creative storytelling experience. So winning is kind of an amorphous blob. If you've ever played any role-playing game, it's similar to Dungeons and Dragons. You don't really win. I guess you could lose, but you don't really win.
Thomas, the wolf objective is similar, but it does not destroy the fleet. So it is somewhat different.
Right, and if his question is, do all the individual wolves have the same objective? That is a good question, and one that we're not willing to share. The win is the friends you make along the way. That's right. So a couple people did submit questions beforehand. There is a term that our Patreon group has coined. I don't know if it has any history beyond that, but it is chaos gremlining. I think it's in reference to someone who plays in a somewhat random or unpredictable manner. So as control, we try to facilitate what all of our players want to do during the game. There's not necessarily a right way to play a mega game, but there might be a wrong way. So the game typically works best if you follow your team prompts first and your individual objectives second. And beyond that, you should always put kind of your fun and the fun of others above a prompt if the two are in conflict. We ask that if you're not enjoying any part of your day, if you're in a role you don't like, or if you have an objective you don't agree with, Control's there to help you fix that. So you could always reach out to Control and we'll help redirect you and work with you to come up with a fun alternative to your prompt. And we encourage anyone who is playing the game to also just be on the lookout for others who are having a hard time or not enjoying their role or their prompt, and see what you can do to help them out. Or if you don't know what to do, grab Control, because we're going to be playing this game for many hours. We want to make sure everyone's having a great time. And if any player does go completely off the rails, chaos gremlining, doing random acts of chaos in a random manner, and it's ruining someone else's experience, Control might step in, but that's not pleasant for anyone, so we hope that doesn't happen. And then I had one other question submitted. It was very specific. It was how do we determine... I don't have it in front of me. Lee, do you have the questions in front of you?
No, but I remember it because it was a good question. How do you distinguish between the captain and the first officer's roles and responsibilities on a ship? The captain um, should generally be the leader of the team, and the one making the rounds around the room, talking to people, making deals, negotiating. While the first officer's job, shit rolls downhill. The first officer's job is to take care of the ship, make sure the ship is ready to go, fueled, all the resources are handled, and that the captain's informed of everything that's going on while the captain's away from the ship.
Exactly. The first officer is that second in command. So if ever there is a wolf attack and the captain is not at the vessel, then whenever there's a wolf attack, if you're a new player, it's like musical chairs. Wherever you are in the room, you have to sit down. That is now the spaceship you're on during the wolf attack. So often you'll find your vessel during a wolf attack doesn't have your captain. So that's when you hope your first officer is there. They're now in command of the vessel. The first officer is typically in charge of the units on the spaceship, all the workforce. They're typically in charge of the guns or the fighter squadrons for that ship, and the shuttles also kind of fall under their charge. And then the other player that is kind of entangled in this mix is your chief engineer, because your chief engineer is responsible for making sure your ship does have enough food and water and fuel and materials in order to activate your different parts of the ship to generate food and water and fuel and materials. So it's ultimately up to the team to divvy up the labor between the captain, the first officer, and the chief engineer. But a guideline is captain has the last call and should be moving around the room. First officer, second in command, and should usually be near their vessel. And chief engineer helps make sure everything's supplied and running.
The Thomas asked if you need to keep individual objectives secret. That's really up to you, and it's going to vary objective to objective, because some people aren't going to want you to achieve. So you're gonna, if you blast out that your job is to assassinate the president, which isn't a job, or which isn't a role, so that's why I said it. Then maybe don't tell people that, because they'll try to stop you. Binary is asking if we have defined roles for the first secretary. Yes, the first secretary doesn't exist anymore. There is now a captain of the Star Alpha. That person is in charge of the Star Alpha. They are acting like a normal starship captain. They have a gun. They will be at the battle table, and they are more or less an apolitical force on the Star Alpha that is not aligned with the president's government.
Their name badge for this game may or may not still say first secretary.
It will be markered. They are not a loose cannon. That is correct. They are the tightest of cannons.
There are a few other specific roles: chief surgeon, scientist, warden. I don't know that we need to get into those on this call. But if you are on one of those ships and you have a question about one of those roles, we'll answer your question. But otherwise, if you want to know more about those specific roles, you should go find those players on the day of the game.
I want to touch on the overall arcing narrative. One of the changes happens to the story happens before the game starts. The game is no longer starting on a wolf attacking the colonies and destroying them. The game is now a group of people that are getting together to launch a colony into deeper reaches of space. Your goal is to travel a great distance over a course of many games and establish a colony far from home. The wolves are still an antagonist, and they are still in the fleet hidden, and they are something that you will have to deal with. But overall, they also sort of want to make it to this new colony. They don't want to destroy the fleet. They want to corrupt the fleet and make it their fleet. That's the overall change. There will still be many attacks by outsiders. It's just they may not be treated the same. So that's the baseline chain. Well, it's still very close to BSG. It's just not quite the exact rip of it. The feel of the game is still going to be very much BSG. You're going to be a fleet trying to survive constant attacks and saboteurs, and you're not going to be able to get support from home. So the feel will still be there, we believe. It's just going to be the end of the game will not be as binary. There won't be fleet wins or fleet survives or fleet is destroyed.
Right, we've seen that in previous plays where it's the last round of the game. It's time to start crashing capital ships into each other.
We also think this is going to give us some freedom for multiple games during the season to have multiple different goals and outcomes, which is something we're looking forward to trying.
That is all that I have prepared. We have everything ready to go. We're looking forward to next weekend. I know it's Friday night. I don't want to steal too much of your guys' time. So I'll give a couple more minutes for some questions, but otherwise, we're going to make this nice and neat and short and sweet, and we can't wait to see you guys next weekend.
So speaking of telling the crew to treat the ship well for the next team, there is a chance that there is a very high chance, a likelihood, it's one of our goals, that decisions made that alter the state of the game will carry over into future games. It may not be one for one, but the things you do in the game will carry into the next. Are there changes to the counselor roles? Logan, you want to go back over what you said about the counselors?
Yeah, I would say the most significant changes is just a strong baseline. In previous games, we gave a packet to the president that said, all right, here are the issues that the council is expected to resolve throughout the game. And the individual counselors were given nothing. And so this was problematic for a couple of reasons. The president could just completely control all of this information, and the counselors had nothing to go off of. And it could be especially damning if the president was a wolf. So the counselors now will know this is historically how we've handled elections. This is how we've handled emergency labor provisions. This is how we've handled the balance between military and political powers. What the military is in control of during a crisis, who the military reports to, and the civilian government. And so the council will have all of these concrete rules to begin the game with, so they know how things are working at the beginning of the game. And it's up to them if they want to leave it that way and move on to other issues, or if they want to change something to work better for the survivor fleet.
Timeline for the next games, think 3 to 9 months between games in Universe. Robert, I've wanted to introduce like a salvager ship for a while. I think that could be a thing at some point. All right. Does anyone have any more questions? We're getting a bit of dead air, so that's typically the sign that it's time to start wrapping this up.
Okay, I think we could close this out here. I just wanted to get just a little bit of information out to specifically our new players before day of. If you've never played before, just the unknown can cause some anxiety. But I just want everyone to know that we will teach the entire game day of. I want all of our return players to know that we've made lots of minor changes, and we're looking forward to seeing how all of these minor changes affect the outcome of the game. We'll probably do a post Q&A sometime in the weeks past the game. And then our next game, except for the con game, I think is not until July. So I'm looking forward to the community day. I'm looking forward to keeping people active on Discord and getting together and hanging out and playing games. Do you know when the con game goes on sale? So, Lee, do you want to take that?
I'm Googling it.
Okay. Yeah, the game itself is free. If you go to BGG Con, if you buy a ticket to BGG Con, you can then sign up for our game. So our game specifically doesn't really go on sale. You just have to come to the convention. Do you know the day of our game? Is it Saturday? Okay. So if you don't buy a 3-day pass or whatever, and you just want to come to the mega game, you'll need to come to the convention on Saturday. Once you buy your ticket, you should be able to sign up for our game.
Blake asks, "What are our favorite things? Our top three favorite things about Shattered around the universe?" I'm gonna start. There is
I think we should each get 3. There's so many.
There is a phase in the game that acts a lot like the board game Sheriff of Nottingham, and I'm looking forward to seeing how that plays out. That's one of the things I'm most excited about. Logan?
Are we going? We're going to do one at a time.
We'll alternate. Yeah.
I'll just say Rorschach ink blobs.
Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah, we can't really go into it more than that, but that'll be fun. I like the way combat rolls in that game. There is a phased combat system over 3 rounds where your starships are closing in on each other. The first 2 rounds, you have a chance to engage and retreat. If you don't retreat, the last round is a close range railgun brawl that will likely end in both ships being heavily damaged or destroyed, and that looks like a lot of fun.
Yeah, just to elaborate on that, like it's nice that combat has a very hard end. Like if you choose to go into space combat, it's not going to last longer than 5 minutes because everyone will die.
What's your second thing, Logan?
My second thing, I mean, I'm just excited that we are playing a game that is influenced by the American Revolutionary War. There is an aspect of the game, if you choose to separate from the empire and form your own new political entity, government entity, you can form a constitution, and it's a very structured part of the game that I'm geeking out over. I'm excited about it.
My last thing that's my top thing about the game is that I don't expect it to come up, but there is an option to orbitally bombard a planet until it is just devoid of life. And when I read that, I stopped reading the book and was satisfied.
Yeah, I remember I was asking you about a question that happened on the next page of the book, and you had no clue because you stopped at orbital bombardment. My third and final is the roles of this game are so radically different than one another and so well fleshed out. I really think that you could play this game. I don't know that anybody would want to, but you could play this next game 30 times and have 30 radically different experiences.
There is a lot of information about that game that we've posted in a Discord channel with a bunch of the roles, the teams laid out. There's maybe a couple more left to preview for you guys, but there's a lot of information out there if you're curious about what that game looks like.
All right. Well, I just want to thank everyone for coming out. We can stop recording, and I'll hang out for a few